Everyday Business Solutions, the podcast that offers you the right perspective on achieving success. We interview business professionals from all over to bring our listeners the right solutions to all their questions. Season 1 is about change management and enabling you to both face and create change in all aspects of your company. We're talking management, sales, service, HR, and more. Let's jump straight into the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Business Solutions. We're here again. My name is Haley Morris. I am your podcast coordinator and host. Today, we have Jessica. Jessica is going to go ahead and jump in. She's going to tell us a bit about herself, what she does, and our topic today, which is networking, the ever-changing art of connections and relationships. So, Jessica, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Jessica, and I'm a corporate strategist. That's what I've been doing for pretty much all of my 9-to-5 career. And on the side, I host a podcast for professional women. It's called The Art of Speaking Up, and it's about professional development and feeling confident at work. And that's pretty much what I do.
All right, great. So Jessica, obviously, she knows being a corporate strategist and having been around the block a couple times, she knows then our topic pretty well. And we're going to start by really just kind of diving into what networking actually is. We all have our own perceptions, but maybe it's not quite what you think. So Jessica, can you help us put a good definition to it?
Definitely. So the idea of networking used to really freak me out. And it was this daunting thing where I felt like I had to talk to strangers and be really polished and be really impressive to them. And it was something that I wasn't interested in and felt stressed out and felt like I had to do to have a successful career, but didn't want to do. And what I realized over time, and it'll be interesting to get your thoughts and perspective too, is that networking, it goes so far beyond meeting people and going to a networking event and like business cards. It's not about any of that stuff for me, at least. It's really about building deep, trusted relationships within your professional life. And some of the most powerful relationships in my quote unquote network aren't ones where I went to a networking event and met someone. They're ones where I have a personal relationship with that person and I've worked with them and they know me really well. So for me, it's really been about depth and longevity. And as an introvert, that really appeals to me much more than what I used to think networking was about.
Wow. It's very interesting that we have two introverts doing this right now, and we're both podcast hosts. So the world is not quite what you think it is, I guess.
Yes. A lot of podcasters are introverts.
I picked the right area then. I thought I wouldn't be able to do it because I do tend to be more introverted. People don't think I am when they meet me because I talk a lot. It's nervous talking. But I talk a lot. And I get excited to meet people. I love people, but I also am very socially exhausted very quickly. I would agree, though, with the networking that the most valuable connections in my network, and really the only ones I can pull on, are those for ones I have some kind of relationship I built with people. So for my academic fraternity, those ones that we hang out and we sit by each other at meeting, or we would go to the bar after meeting, and just kind of chat and catch up. And, we'd network also with somebody from the rival academic fraternity, and you end up spending your Halloween night with an entire group of them. And it's like, okay. Or when professors and stuff I've had in college, and we've staying after class or in between projects, and you're just talking to them, catching up, go to their office and meet, and then they'll you need a little help. Oh, they have a suggestion, or they have something that might interest you profession-wise. And I have the same thing with people I work with now. I love to connect to people in the office, and some people I connect more strongly with. But when it came to, I was doing talent acquisition, and I had just graduated and wanted to go full-time, and we didn't have demand on our recruitment front for another full-timer, or even really for the two of us that there were. They're like, okay, what do we do with you? And they literally made a position around their need in my skill set, and that's why we have a podcast today. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the old inaccurate definition of networking that I had was you have to go find people and you have to like go out there, which maybe works for some people. It feels a little daunting to me, but I think for me, and this sounds like a little bit of what you were saying, it's more just about being open. So I'm not necessarily out there like chasing people and trying to meet people, but it's just sort of when I'm in the kitchen at work, during non-COVID times, like instead of avoiding eye contact, saying hello to someone. And just when you have that openness all the time, you never know when there's going to be some sort of connection and then things happen on their own. So you don't have to be like aggressively going to networking events or like adding people on LinkedIn, or I'm trying to think of like all the different misconceptions, but I think it's just more about being open, showing a little bit of your personality, and then you find the people, like you said, who you naturally gravitate towards, and then you can network with those people. You don't have to like force feed yourself the people who you don't naturally feel connected to.
Yeah, because I think there's that idea too that the more people in the more industries, the more jobs, the better. But if it's an awkward relationship and they need somebody to kind of maybe fill a position, or they want to recommend for a job, or if they want to go, golfing with on a Saturday and talk business slash personal, if it's an awkward relationship, you're going to be the last person they think of, if at all.
Yeah, definitely. And also the thing about networking is it's not like you're trying to network with everyone. The whole point of it is finding your specific people. So it should, to a certain extent, feel good, whether you really click with that person personally, or maybe what they do is so interesting to you that you feel compelled to get to know them and learn more about them. So if we can't possibly network with everyone, we might as well narrow in on the places where we have a genuine interest, so it doesn't feel like we're like slogging through the mud and it's so painful and horrible.
Well, and that's what you bring to your office too, isn't it? If you have a connection with a niche and you have that strong relationship and you come into an office, whether you're marketing, sales, support, engineer, whatever you're doing in that office, there's so many different kinds of positions. What makes an office great is diversity. It's not every person has a million different connections that are all from all over. It's each person brings their own unique experience, their own unique network, and that's how it actually grows. So when people are talking, well, I have to know all these people to market to them, or I have to know all these people to sell to them. It's that affinity over awareness. Awareness is like I kind of recognize their face and it's passing, but affinity is that deeper connection, that understanding, that brand awareness that we strive for, and it's there on a personal level too. So
I agree. And I think sometimes the affinity gets built just by really caring about the work that you do. And when you really care about the work that you do, I think what happens with all the people you work with is, at least for me, I think for other people too, you pivot into a mindset of serving them and partnering with them. And I think people can feel that and people appreciate that. And I think it's when you do that consistently over time, then they want to call on you to support you as well. So this also speaks to being in a position and a field that you like, because when you like it, you're naturally happy, you're going to show up that way. So it kind of creates this spiral effect of like you're showing up really well, and then people are going to want to support you and help you reach your goals.
yeah, it's so, I mean, just thinking about like what I do when I get excited, people are like, oh, your eyes lit up. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even notice. I was just going on, I was just doing my talking thing again. I was like, but you can tell me to shut up at any point. But they get excited and it's a subject maybe they don't care about at all. Like, if I'm getting into talking about the podcast, or I'm getting into talking about, I love studying fashion history and social trends and things like that as far as how we behave. And I start talking about it and they're like, I didn't care, but that's really interesting.
I think joy is contagious. And I think that people in an office setting are craving joy. And I think that they're craving authenticity. And so when you are genuinely enjoying something and genuinely feeling happy, people are drawn to you. And I think that that's so important, because we can get so caught up in, the day to day and the monotony. I think we leave sometimes all of the interesting parts of our personalities like at the door when we enter into our jobs. And I think it's so powerful to just come in with like a little bit of extra enthusiasm, like just a little bit of extra energy, extra positivity.
Yeah, because your network starts with who's immediately around you. If you can't connect to them, you're not going to connect outside of that. Um,
Exactly.
but it also, with the joy, it's, I think any of our personality traits, our attitude, the way we carry ourselves, the air we put off, it's so contagious. So it's, you get back what you put out. And if you're putting out like brooding, bored, that kind of trudging through the workday, the people around you are going to feel it and they're going to put it right back. And it's going to just like come at you tenfold. Like you're not ready to be there. So the day's not going to be ready for you. Um, but it's like you said, if you're putting out happiness and things like that, people feed off of it and they give it back. So,
Yeah. And it has to be, I think it has to be genuine. So you don't want to be forcing yourself. But I think
mhm.
once you remind yourself, like, what do I like about my job? What do I really enjoy about this? They're usually, unless you're in a situation that you really don't like, there are usually things about it that you feel really lucky to have and that feel really special. Sometimes if I'm in a funk about my job, I think back to like when I interviewed for it and I really wanted it and I really wanted it. And I think about the moments of like being finished with the interview and wondering, am I going to get this position? And I try to remind myself, like, I was so excited for this. And then that helps me see and like get out of like the day-to-day stresses that can sometimes make you forget why you chose to be there in the first place.
Yeah. So I would agree too, because for me, I like to pick up the little things I'm trying to teach my younger siblings. Like, you have to choose to be happy, but you choose to be happy. Like, it's not something that somebody can define or explain or teach you. It's just literally an internal decision to be content with the day's things that actually make you happy. So I like lunchtime. I like talking with coworkers. I can't do it all the time. Um, though some people I think I do, because I literally, part of my job is just talking. um, you can't do what you like all the time. um, so you have to learn when you get that energy boost from doing something you like, whether it's just saying hello, how are you, and catching up for 2 seconds, to carry it. And then like that makes it genuine versus being like, oh, I hate my job but I gotta be happy for the phone call.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And, sometimes you have to put on a face. You got to do what you got to do.
Mhm.
But I do think that when you genuinely are caring and engaged, people really feel it and it makes them want to work with you. It makes them want to help you. And I think we really underestimate the power of mood and energy. And we just focus on work and outputs. And we forget that we're all human and that we all just want to feel happy and content. And you can make that happen for other people simply by the way you show up.
It's so important. Like I said, like, you're gonna come in with bad days. I feel like we all have them. Especially, there's just some things in life you can't counterbalance by just being happy, or it's a little harder to find the happiness, especially with COVID. There's been a lot of people who have been kind of knocked down. So it's being able to sometimes just like set it off your shoulders for a couple moments and realize that that's okay to actually let yourself not worry and let yourself enjoy a second. That you don't, because it's hard and because you have to do something about it soon, or because you have to figure something out, doesn't mean that it has to be every second of your day. It could be an hour of your day, it could be 2 hours of your day if it's a really big issue, but you are allowed to enjoy your day too.
Yeah, I think when big difficult things are happening, sometimes I know for me it just takes over, and sometimes there's just a period of time where I'm in it and that's okay too. And whenever you're in it, it feels like it's going to last forever. It's so hard to remember and imagine how it's going to feel when it passes, and then it passes and then you're fine and then something happens again.
I have a friend who, she and her boyfriend are going through a difficult time right now, not in their relationship, but he's handling something that's very hard. And she's, you know, she cares about him a lot. And it means, like, right now with the situation, she's not able to get attention from him. They're not able to spend, like, they only get to spend so many hours a week together. They're not able to have that time. And she felt bad for being upset about it. And then we had to be like, okay, you're allowed to be upset, because sometimes even allowing yourself to fully feel those emotions helps you move on to the next part more easily. And it's not like that you should feel guilty for getting over something or seeking your own happiness in bad situations. So it's a very interesting life, but coming back to like the networking aspect in particular, it's so important to meet your emotions at a good level and kind of meet them head on and learn how to cope with them throughout the day. Because again, what you put out is what you get in. And if you're putting out negativity, if you're putting out always like these bad emotions, they're going to come back at you. And it tends to mean that if you are building a network or you are building relationships, they're not going to necessarily be the most positive for you. You want to find your niche, but you want to find the niche that builds you within your network. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I think it's contagious. And I also think we are going to be at our jobs no matter what. So why not enjoy it? Why not make it something positive? I think when you get into a bad headspace, it makes the day longer. It doesn't really help you feel better. And so I think it's just really helpful to recognize it. And sometimes it's about changing jobs, right? If a job isn't working, you can change it. But if that's not the solution, then sort of like, why not just show up as best you can? Why not have it be as enjoyable as it possibly can be?
and you might get to the point where you're like, oh, my mindset was the only thing holding me back. I might not like the task I'm doing, but I really like this office. Or maybe some of the office, it's not quite my personality, but I actually can just lose myself in the task and I can connect to people anyways. And then you find yourself there for a couple of years because you actually don't mind, or you actually really want to come up to work most days. So,
Yeah, there's usually something you can find. And I also think with the things that you don't enjoy, that's really helpful data to start thinking about for future roles and the rest of your career. What are my non-negotiables that I really need to have in place to feel happy and satisfied in a job? And then what are the things that I prefer to have, but they're not necessarily deal breakers? Because I think it's really important to be discerning, especially if you're making a job change. There's so much effort in interviewing and landing a role. So why not be really clear and specific about exactly what is going to make you happy? Because there are so many positions out there. You are likely to find something if you stay in the search and you stay committed.
and you're interviewing the business too for the job. You're seeing if it's a fit for you as well. And ultimately, if you make sure it's a fit and you know it's a two-way interview, then you're more likely to get into that job and be satisfied with it because you did your due diligence, and then
Yes,
then coming back around, you can expand your network there by connecting on a deeper level with the people you work with. So,
totally. For me, when I'm interviewing, I feel like my spidey sense is so important, and it's not super scientific, but I just try to really sense like, what am I feeling in this place? What kind of vibe am I getting? And it's been really accurate so far.
mhm. I walked into this office and I was like, oh, everybody's out now, but I was like, I like this. Like, I like this. And I was looking at two different jobs. My dad was pushing me towards one job because it was a bigger company that had been around longer. He knew its name and he was more comfortable with me being in that setting because he thought more stable. But I walked in here and I was like, no, I want to be here. Like, this is the office I want to be in. I was like, I don't even care what I do. I just think these people are cool. And, I was
Yeah.
still like very introverted about the whole thing because then I talked to so many people and I was like, oh my goodness, what if they don't like me? you know,
Yeah.
that 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 social fear or whatever when I interact with people, I have it every time, but I still like enjoyed those interactions. I still wanted to be here, and my spidey sense was like, yes, go for it, and it
Yeah.
worked out both ways. So,
I'm so glad that it worked out for you. And I think it's sort of like a workplace has its own personality, and you can almost feel the collective energy when you're there. And for me, it's the same. That impression that I got right at the beginning usually turns out to be right.
yeah, and usually if you are feeling that and it's reflected in how you're carrying yourself, even if you're nervous or you don't answer the questions all perfect, it's going to move you up their priority list. They're going to be like, she connected or he connected. And they're going to consider you when it comes time to make the final decisions.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree.
Um, so kind of going off of what we talked about with networking, with building these connections, with kind of staying true to ourselves, how would you say it's shifted? Because obviously we've seen trends throughout time for a while, like even sales and marketing, it was just go out and talk to people. and your priority is making the sale or making them interested, even if it was brief. So how would you say that, between how we networked before, that old definition of networking, or that old idea of what it was, how would you say it shifts, has shifted with current history and even with the current situation?
Yeah, I think we probably have to put in more effort than we used to. Even in day-to-day work, I'm feeling this. We don't have, depending on what our work situation is, but if we're in a remote situation, you don't have those hallway interactions. You're not having those impromptu conversations with people. And I think that really changes things, because that is where a lot of those bonds get formed, is those unscheduled moments of time. And so I think right now it's really important to think about manufacturing those and how those can be created. So like, I have 2 team meetings every week instead of 1. And during the second one, we don't talk about our projects. We talk about other things, and that helps us feel connected. So I think it's stuff like that where you're just thinking about, okay, how can I feel connected to this person beyond the 4 meetings that I am showing up, in with that person. And I think also we have to drop the story that we're bothering people, that people don't have time for us, that, we're asking too much to get on someone's calendar. It's so funny because as my title has grown, I'm sort of a non-hierarchical person. Like, I sort of think of everyone similarly, treat everyone similarly, and I don't also see myself within the hierarchy. But I just noticed that people the other day was like, why are people so scared to get on my calendar? Why are people so excessively grateful and so apologetic every time they schedule time? And I realized, like, oh, they think I'm so busy and I don't have time for them, but I do, and I love meeting with them. And so I think, not everyone's generous with their time, but I think it's always good to assume that everyone is, and just be proactive about connecting with the people that you want to connect to. And maybe once in a while, someone will turn you down and it'll feel crappy for a minute or two, or it'll feel bad for a minute or two. And then you'll move on to the next one and you'll be okay. So I think it's important not to be afraid to reach out to people and not to be afraid to bug people a little bit, because that's also, I think, how those connections are going to get maintained right now.
Especially because, some people, I when I send out a link to put their event on my calendar, I'm always like, I'll go by your time. That's my big thing, is when you have availability, like, we'll make it work. My schedule's way more open than you think. And so they can do, if they're in person locally, we can go meet for lunch or something. If they're not, we can do a Zoom call or we can do a phone call. A good amount of people, once I like added the Zoom integration, was able to put them, where they could pick that option. We'll pick that option. And I'm always kind of like, oh, I can't believe you picked a phone call when somebody did. Like, I want to see your face. But they're more comfortable and things about it. But they like that connection, and you tend to spend more time on the call, or you tend to talk about, when it's just a Zoom call, it tends to be like, oh, light conversation that leads into what we're trying to get to, and the business part of it's maybe like this big. But it's so, like, you come out and you're smiling. Oh, I really like talking to that person. Did you know blah blah blah? Half the time you learn something. So I try to bring it back to the phone call too, that they're still getting that same value out of it, even if they didn't think they were coming in for that kind of value. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I, like you said too, it's the non-business part of the conversation that is so important. And I think we always forget that. We're always so focused on, like, what do I need? What am I working on? And it's that softer element that I think is really at the heart of networking.
mhm. Yeah, because people want to know, of course, what you do business in, but I feel like they don't want to know until they know you.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, like, people don't want to buy from a brand until they know the brand these days. And that's something that's shifted over time too, as it used to be you shop around and find the best deal at the best quality. And now it's like, well, you find a brand that follows kind of like the principles and things that you uphold, and then you might spend more for that product. But you tend to love the product more, partly just because of who makes it, but also because you feel confident in how they made it, or what they're doing with that, whether it's, whether it's SaaS or it's a retail product, or it's anything in between. So,
Yeah. I think we want to feel connected to it.
mm-hmm. Well, and that's the content marketing idea, is people want to feel somebody through what they're actually putting out. A lot of companies are gaining popularity because their commercials are funny and engaging. There's this kind of theme of like Coca-Cola's relationship building through, gatherings and stuff like that, which is obviously we've gone a little quiet on that recently. But they did the names on the bottles and all the commercials were in line with that. And then ours is like efficiency. So we're really working on ways to show people that by gaining efficiency in the things they do and use, they'll have more time for them, more time for getting important things done at the office, but also getting out a little bit early, or maybe not working as many overtime hours, if at all. That it comes back to, okay, your brand, or that person that you just met because you went out to lunch versus shaking hands at a conference or something. So
Yeah, definitely. I think the bar is higher. People expect more. And so brands are having to show their soul and their personality so that people feel connected. Because otherwise, like, we tune things out, and we're so trained to tune out ads as much as we possibly can. And so I think that's part of it too.
oh, and the new thing with like the YouTube ads that come in the middle of the video, and
Uh,
people are like, the business side, they're like, oh, that's a good idea. And I'm like, don't do it. It instills deep, ugly emotions in the watcher.
oh
Does.
my gosh, when you can't skip, it's such a bad feeling when you've gotten used to skipping it and then you're forced to watch like a whole minute. It feels like forever.
I think I started a video once and it was like you can skip after the 5 seconds or whatever it is. But it was like a 15-20 minute ad, and I watched it all the way to the end, and I got to the end, I was like, this isn't what I came for. But I liked it. It was engaging. It caught my interest in 5 seconds, and I kept going, and I had the option to tune out whenever I was ready. But like you have to realize sometimes somebody's already connecting to a video with those ads. So if you interrupt the middle of it, they're going to be a little salty and they
Yeah.
might project those feelings onto your brand.
Yeah.
Um, it's the same thing though, because our personal brand, when we network, when you first meet somebody, what we try to bring is a genuine person. If you're just cutting into things that they already value by saying, oh, hey, like blah, blah, it's not going to be so much literally like you're inserting them on their schedule. It's like literally maybe you're disrupting their day because they're having a really good day and you come in and you're just very like aggressive about wanting to meet them. And then they're like, oh, okay.
It has to be natural. There
Has to
has to
be.
be an organic element to it, which isn't, I'm not saying like don't reach out and invite someone to a coffee, but the more organic you can make that, like, do you have something in common with them? I think when it comes out of nowhere, sometimes it can feel surprising. But that being said, I've had random people message me on LinkedIn and ask if they could do a quick coffee. And if I have time, then I say yes. So I think it's always worth trying. Just be respectful and be
Mm-hmm.
grateful ahead of time.
Yep. I would agree. I would agree. There's a little bit of an art to it, but the art's like going to be different for everybody because every person is different and how you connect to people is going to be different. But that comes back to connecting to people, building a relationship with people, and not just shaking their hands or whatever. I think we all have that moment probably a few times now that we're able to see people face to face when you're like, okay, I want to shake your hand now, but we can't. So you just
Yeah.
awkwardly stare at each other with that look. Or like you're both huggers and you're like, I just want to give you a hug.
Oh,
And
it's the worst.
you're like over the little like slips of your mask, you're like giving each other the look and you just kind of stand there for a moment. And
Yeah.
it's awkward, but oddly, that's part of the relationship you just built, is you both just kind of bond over like this handling the situation together and having that little thing in common. But yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think so much bonding is happening over coronavirus. It's like, I was just thinking about it the other day. It's so crazy that everyone in the world is dealing with this all at once. I was just like,
Mhm.
wow, I don't know if there have been things in my lifetime that have been on this scale that way.
And I think even like people mentioned the recession in '08 because that was so big. But it's still like, I mean, I was back in '08. I was still with my biological mom. We were poor, so everything was poor to start with. Nothing changed for us really. But some people did well. Again, there's some businesses that actually did better, and then there's some that were dramatically impacted in the other way. But it's never been this whole where we literally knocked the entire world sideways with this stuff. So we
Yeah.
talk to people in Hong Kong about it, and we'll be like, "What's your guys' rule about wearing a mask?" And in Hong Kong, it's a $5,000 fine and like 3 months in jail or something if you get caught without it. And I
Wow.
was like, "We don't do that." And she's like, "And your neighbors will rat you out, but people wear it much more
Yeah.
frequently. It was part of the culture ahead of time." But like, that was a conversation never thought I'd have.
Whoa. Yeah.
Yeah. And so talking to people on the other side of the world, and you're both handling, the same situation, maybe just differently, but you're both seeing the same crazy virus and its impacts.
Yeah. It's so fascinating.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, all right. Would you like to, before we wrap up, because I think we are at a really good point to start to close this out. We've given people a lot of food for thought. Did you have any other advice or things that you would like to mention before we close out?
I would just tell people to be brave in their networking. I think we all want to be super confident all the time, but I would just say to someone listening who feels like they shouldn't network or they don't have the personality for it, that that's not true. And that we are all capable of building human connections, and we're also all capable of pushing ourselves outside our comfort zones. And so, if someone does feel a little bit afraid or a little bit intimidated, that's totally normal. And I think it's an invitation to just lean in closer to your edge and grow.
Mm-hmm. And some people will bond with you over that nervousness too. So
Exactly. Yeah, we all feel it in some situation or another.
mhm, I would agree. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, Jessica. We are going to go ahead and wrap up right here. As a reminder, we are going to have a blog post going out, and we'll share any of Jessica's information, like her podcast she mentioned, for example, right there in the blog and in the description of this episode. Don't forget to go ahead and subscribe, give us a follow, and don't forget to review, because as much as I love getting input from wonderful people like Jessica, I love to get yours as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.